Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brews and Bites. We have a great episode today. It's titled The Future of Data Archive and have a few excellent guests. Before we get started, I just want to get some housekeeping items off the table. If you do want to ask questions, go ahead and ask questions. We like this to be very interactive, very informal, so please go ahead and ask questions. We do have some attachments attached to the webinar or the broadcast today, so you can go ahead and take a look at those in your tool panel there to your right. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, the topic today is Future of Data Archive. That could go a lot of different ways. We're looking forward to a very exciting conversation. We have two guests from Fujifilm and also Eric, who's on the show often. So we'll go ahead and start with, let's start with introductions to you, Rich and Nami. Let's start with you, Rich, then go to Nami, and then Eric, you can go ahead and introduce yourself. So take it away, Rich.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot, Eric and Adrian, for having us today. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Rich Gadomski. I'm responsible for evangelizing tape technology for Fujifilm Recording Media USA. We're located just north of New York City in Valhalla, New York. So I've been with Fujifilm for 17 years now. Who's counting, though? Prior to that, I was with Sony, also in data tape marketing, and also with Maxell Corporation. And I started up their data tape product line many years ago. So I'm a veteran of the tape technology marketing efforts over the last couple of decades.
How about you, Nami?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nami Matsumoto, Director of Data Management Solutions at Fujifilm Recording Media USA. Thanks from myself to Adrian and both Adrian and Eric for having me. My team, Data Management Solutions, provides data management solutions that effectively manage and optimize customers' data as we see tremendous data growth in zettabytes worldwide. I've been with Fujifilm for 4 years, 2 years in Japan and 2 years in the United States. Actually, this morning I found out that today marks my 2nd anniversary here in the United States. So,
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you. And prior to Fujifilm, I worked for IBM for 11 years with a mix of sales and a little bit of engineering experience. So, again, thanks for having me.
So very well-rounded experience for both of you. So looking forward to the conversation. And Eric, you're frequent guest, but go ahead. Maybe you have something new to say this time.
I feel like I have to follow the better acts here. That's not fair.
Yeah.
I'm Eric Day. I'm in charge of product management at Caringo. I have my fingers in various parts of the development and engineering and marketing sales of the of our software. And prior to Caringo, I've done a lot of work in the IT administration roles. So basically, users of I would have loved to have had our product back when I was in charge of IT.
Yep, and Eric is also an amateur pilot, right, Eric? So that way, that's something new. That
private pilot.
Private pilot.
Hopefully not too amateur.
Yeah,
amateur. I'm not a pilot, so I don't know what that.
I fly for fun.
Oh, there you go. Fly for fun. That's good. And since this is Brews and Bites, we have to talk about our brews. So we'll start with Nami this time. So Nami, what brew are you drinking?
Okay. Yeah. So hope you see this. So I'm just gonna. So this is kombucha.
Oh yeah. Kombucha.
Yeah. Are you familiar with it? I just love kombucha. Like since I came here.
Second guest who has brought kombucha.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Oh gosh, I should have checked that. But yeah, I'm energizing myself with the 2 billion probiotic cultures. So it initially sounds like Japanese because actually in Japan we have a different kombucha which is made from seaweed. So I was initially thinking that, oh, is this kombucha from Japan? But I just learned that, it's kind of really getting popular in the United States and Europe and Australia. So
yeah.
Fun thing. Yep.
Well, there you go. Quite a brew. How about you, Rich? What are you drinking?
I've got a couple of drinks here. I must admit, I'm a Starbucks fan. Nothing too original about that, but I hate waiting in lines at Starbucks, so I brew it at home. But I rarely buy it in the shops. But otherwise, I'm drinking my lemon water. I don't know if you guys have ever, or anyone has had a kidney stone, but lemon water is a good antidote for that. I always put lemon in my ice water, so that's what I'm drinking. A little coffee, a little water, a little lemon.
Yeah, that's a good mix. And how about you, Eric?
Well, I am drinking a honey ale from Revolver Brewing, and it's in my math-themed glasses, so it's got Euler's number featured on this particular one.
Oh, well, there you go. Always, you never disappoint with your brew, and I'm drinking my my mint green tea that I seem to be addicted to, which is great. You're brewing some fresh mint green tea. So with that, let's go ahead and get the conversation started. You know, I think we have to start with just the definition of archive. I know we had a discussion about this, you know, preparing for this. So maybe let's start with how you define archive. We'll start with you, Rich, how you define archive, just to go ahead and set the foundation for the viewers.
Sure thing. Yeah. So, you know, it's a great question because what we see is a lot of people confuse backup with archive. So over the years, we've come up with a pretty simple definition, and we call backup the process of copying data to protect it against loss or natural disaster or accidental deletion, for example. So you're backing up from that copy of data. And then when we talk about archive, we talk about a move process. We're moving data from primary storage, typically more expensive tiers of storage, to a long-term, more economy tier of storage, whether that be disk or tape or cloud, for example. So for us, archive is a move of the data, and while backup is copy. So that's maybe oversimplified, but I think a good way to think about it.
Do you have anything to add to that, Nami, or maybe talk about certain workflows that you're aware of where archive is prevalent versus other types of data protection or those types of workflows?
Sure. Yeah, I think Rich highlighted, long-term versus, non-long-term. I believe that, like, for example, M&D customers, they have to keep their data forever. So I think, so this kind of comes back to the duration of how long you would really want to keep your data. And also talking about backup versus archive, I think backup is more of like creating generations of data. Versus with archive, it's just one sole copy of the data that you really want to preserve for maybe forever, but at least like 50+ years.
So a confusing term then that gets blended in there is active archive. So how would you compare active archive to archive?
Yeah, so regarding active archive, so that is where so customers would want to have a little bit more frequent access to the data. So it's kind of a mix where active archive would allow customers to access your data on a really more frequently basis and also retrieve the data more quickly, versus a deeper archive, which is a kind of another term, is data that you can kind of sit there for a while, like in your local desktop or local laptop. You might not really remember what you have stored, and you haven't really accessed that data for maybe more than a year. So that's kind of considered as a deep archive versus an active archive.
Okay. I do think active archiving is getting more and more popular today, because people don't want to lose access to their data. They never know when they're going to need it. When IT managers ask me, "Hey, can we delete these files?" I say, no. So yeah, people want access to the files and to their content, but we can't store everything forever on primary storage. So we have to start managing this in an intelligent way. And that's what Active Archive does for you. It by user policy, using an intelligent software layer, will automatically migrate content, from expensive tiers of storage to long-term economy tiers of storage. Again, that's disk, tape, cloud. But in this way, we can control the budgets. We can maintain access to the content without IT intervention. And that's transparent to the end user. So as long as they can get it, there might be a little bit of latency, depending on where it is. But if the data is getting more and more frequently accessed, it can always move up the tiers of storage, for example.
Yeah, so I'd see that there's this old concept of archive, which was, I don't have room for it, get it off my system. I probably won't ever use this again, but I'm going to kind of put it here in the trash folder.
Mhm.
And if I need to undelete it, then I'll go through whatever effort I have to. But at some point, it'll just get forgotten. There's backup, which I won't call archive, but you hope to never need those generations of backup that you make. They become irrelevant at some point, and again, they're gone and forgotten. And then there's this newer class, which technology now makes available to us, which is this, I need to make room for it, but I don't want to let go of it yet. So it's still valuable to me. I just don't need it. I don't need it now. And so I need to move it someplace that's more cost effective and let me use my primary storage for the stuff that's active and I'm working on now.
So how has that evolved over the years? I think, taking a look, maybe our viewers, took a look at the archive market 5 years ago, maybe even longer than that. Like how have the technologies evolved to help users with that, being able to move the data to different tiers? We speak about intelligent data management, but maybe go into a little more detail there, what you all are seeing as far as the ecosystem and products and advancements in that space. So maybe we'll start with how about we'll start with you, Rich, and then we'll go the same order.
Yeah, well, it's really all about the metadata, being able to identify the content that you have, being able to search it and groom it, and move it by policy to appropriate tiers of storage. And in many cases, those are an active archive environment, leveraging a tape system, for example. But I want to just back up. I mean, the term archive itself, you talk about 5 or 10 years ago, had a very negative connotation for the IT users and their clients. Nobody wants to strand data and have it inaccessible, and that was kind of the connotation of an archive. So active archive means that the data is still live and active. It's still online all the time, easily accessible. So we rarely talk about archive today. I mean, we really talk about active archive, and I think that solves a lot of problems. As we mentioned earlier, from a budgetary perspective, and ease of user access. But the value of data is increasing. There's just no question about it. And then when you throw in things like artificial intelligence, now we can really leverage the value of data. Therefore, we want to keep more of that data for longer periods of time. How are we going to do that? We can't do that on primary storage alone, just from a CapEx and OpEx perspective. So critical that we be able to get the data in the right place at the right time. From many perspectives. And Nami, I don't know if you want to add to that, but please.
Yeah, so as Rich mentioned, the value of the data is increasing, but at the same time, the amount of data is also, of course, increasing. And that's where, it's getting really impossible for people to manage their data on a manual basis. So I think in the beginning, I mentioned like zettabytes. We're getting into the zettabytes worldwide. I'm not sure like how many people are really familiar with this, unit of measure, unit zettabytes, but just to give you an education here. So terabytes, petabytes,
exabytes.
Exabytes. And then we go to zettabytes. So there's a lot of data being produced and also stored on storage right now. So again, that's really getting very much complex there, and that's where we really have to be smart about using all these types of storage, and managing all the data in different silos. So as Rich mentioned, automating policies is really key, with even more key item when we talk about archiving, compared to like 5 or 10 years ago, because the volume of data is really rapidly increasing, and also the searchability. For example, I know that, for example, Karingo's product Swarm has a nice, searchable search capability, and I think this kind of transparency to user is really key, and kind of leads to the ease of use for customers to easily manage their data and also optimize their data by setting up automating policies there.
Yeah, yeah, you hit a lot of points there. I mean, were you going to add something, Rich?
Oh, no, just, and
Okay.
with Nami's Object Archive software, it enables customers to migrate data from typical disk-based object storage to tape-based storage, where it's still in the native object storage format. But and then what that does is, again, it adds another tier to support the object storage for even less frequently accessed data. But there's definitely, when you look at TCO for tape, it has an advantage, especially due to energy consumption, where the energy consumption is less. So in as much as you can add a tier to support object storage, I think that's a great advantage also.
Yeah, and I guess that leads to a good question for Eric. It's, historically, you take a look at tape, you take a look at object. A lot of vendors like to pit tape against object, and now, or I would say disk-based object to tape-based object, right? We need to kind of clarify that now. But now these technologies are working together, and they're working well together. Why is that?
So let me back up for one moment and just put kind of a finer point on what both Rich and Nami said. So the old definition of archive was, please don't take my data away, but eventually it goes somewhere else and you can't touch it ever again. And, the reason is because you put it in a salt line, a truck arrived, it left, and so, it takes hours or days to get it back, and a lot of manual effort. The evolution of that now is that it's no longer a manual effort to move it between tiers. What you're looking at is an automation of the movement, and it's really a demand-based automation. And so, it's intelligent storage. The storage system itself is not dumb. It actually knows about the other tiers in the system. And so, object and tape playing well with each other, it's actually a very natural fit. Especially now, you see that in the evolution of people putting object front ends on top of, in front of the tape access. And the reasoning for that is because tapes were very good at sort of this key value style of access, meaning that I know the reference to the thing that I want, that has to get resolved into a tape in a block somewhere on that tape, or a file number. But the whole concept of I have a thing that I want back, you go and find it and get it for me, and I don't care, if it's on tape 100 or tape 3 in the system, go and retrieve it. And so that works very well in what we're talking about here, which is this idea that as something is less frequently used, you're willing to trade off the cost to store it on an ongoing basis to the latency to access it for the end user. And as long as the intelligent storage system can make that seamless to the user, the users understand that a whole lot better than, well, sorry, we archived that last year and you can't have it. So that's kind of the evolution of that, and that's why I think that object and tape are really they're really the same thing. It's just it deals with what is the back end storage behind that unified object layer. Is it SSD? Is it traditional spinning hard drives, or is it a a tape system back there.
Yeah, I'll just throw in too, another key factor today, especially with cybercrime, is being able to make a copy of the data and export it out of the system. What we call an air gap.
Mm-hmm.
So physically disconnecting and protecting data that way is kind of a last line of defense against cybercrime, which it's amazing to me today in the COVID environment how cyber criminals haven't gotten away. They've just upped their game, and they're even taking advantage of the healthcare system. So maybe look at the FBI websites. They say one of the best ways to protect yourself against cybercrime is an offsite copy. So tape air gap is another key advantage, and supports that whole ecosystem now for object storage.
Yeah, and talking about deployment, I mean, combining disk-based and tape-based object isn't really a new concept, right? I mean, some of the largest organizations in the world have been doing this in the cloud space, correct? I think you all here on this panel have insight into that. So, I mean, it's done pretty well for the likes of Amazon and Google and others. And what I'm hearing you all say is now, organizations of any size can really deploy in the same fashion, but within their own data centers. Is that a fair statement?
Yep, I totally agree. Sorry, was this a question to Eric? I'm just going to jump in. Yeah.
Oh, for any of you, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but absolutely. I mean, as many of you know, I mean, Amazon offers a lot of types of storage in their cloud offerings, and they have at least like 2 archival tiers there. And I think there are many cloud providers that provide those archiving tiers. So I think there is a need globally, worldwide. And like what Adrian said, I totally agree that there are, pros and cons versus cloud, having that archiving capability into the cloud and versus having this archival capability on premise. Of course, there are also concepts of hybrid cloud. So I would assume that a lot of customers are using both, taking both advantages of cloud and on-premise. And of course, with on-premise solutions, my object archive can, kind of help in the back end. And like, just for example, behind Caringo Swarm, and also, protect your data with a physical air gap, like Rich mentioned. So.
Yeah, I think that air gapped one is huge. Being able to really do a secure deployment of a very cost-effective and optimal solution. Where else do you see? I mean, where are things going for archive? I mean, where do you see advancements? Rich, I think you spoke briefly about artificial intelligence and subset machine learning. But where are archive technologies going? Where's the market going? What do we have to look forward to?
Well, I think it really just kind of points to the fundamental issue of the more and more data we have, and how do we manage that data? It's growing in value, and when you can use artificial intelligence tools to analyze that data, you can derive competitive advantage from that data. Therefore, you want to keep that cycle going, constantly improve upon it. I like to think about autonomous vehicles. When those really get launched out on the open road, you're going to want to keep the data from that vehicle the first 10,000 miles, compare it to the second 10,000 miles, the third 10,000 miles. The more and more data you have, you can refine the algorithms and improve the performance and the safety, predictability of the vehicles. But so that means you're going to have to keep all of that data. And that's going to have to be actively archived until it's needed again for analysis. So it just kind of gets back to increasing volumes of data, more value. We can analyze it now. Therefore, we have to keep more of it for longer periods of time. And that's going to improve the performance of products that impact all of our lives. So the data really is critical, and being able to keep as much of it as possible for as long as possible is where I think the archive market is going. And again, that just really points to active archive.
Absolutely. Nami, where do you see the market going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like with this COVID happening, I think there are a lot of researchers storing very important data. Like, for example, having this research in order to produce the vaccines and, you know, all the transportation and everything like that. So, you know, the need and, you know, people are, I think, getting really used to having data. And they're just like with your iPhone, you keep on just adding your data on a daily basis. But, you know, I think people really have to realize that, you know, this is becoming, you know, their issue. This will become their issue, you know, from a personal perspective and a kind of a company perspective, both ways. So I think it will naturally be very necessary for organizations to consider, you know, archiving, and the future will come with it, with the exponential data growth. Yep.
Definitely. Eric, where do you see things going?
So the trend here is that we're tending towards self-service is what we're looking at here, which is no longer is it the administrator saying, here's your disk drive or here's your volume, and when you fill it, I'm going to take stuff off of it and put it someplace else. But it's really towards the idea that the user needs to drive their behavior, which is, you know, I need access to data that has been produced in the past. It may not be mine. It may be stuff, you know, other data in the company. I've got an idea for reanalyzing something. And so if you can structure a IT and storage framework with around that, where you put the policies in place that you need to manage your storage system, and you managed your security and access to it, you need to really look at enabling users to go and get the information they need. Because if you can break down barriers to the, you know, the what if I go look at that autonomous driving vehicle data in some other way, you know, the stuff that was captured, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, I've got another idea for it. If there's a barrier in the way to you getting access to that data, you know,
Exactly.
if I've got to go to a different department, I get that's different admin, he's going to have to get the truck to drive back from the salt mine to get the, it's not going to happen. You know, so that's a barrier in the way of innovation there. And so if you can structure the storage system around that concept of users being able to drive their own behaviors in it, while you've put the IT management framework around it, that's the trend. And so it's around automating that seamless movement across tiers, you know, forward and backwards across it. So migrating out to higher latency, lower cost storage when it calls for it, but also then migrating it back when it calls for it. And really, when it calls for it, is all driven by user behavior. So I see the trend is more towards, you know, self-service and letting people operate in ways that were traditionally very rigid and structured by, you know, the IT department.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's got to be transparent to the end user, and the service level agreements have to be maintained. You know, people aren't willing to sacrifice, especially in today's culture. Everybody wants everything instantly, right? So, but you know, another thing that I often think about these days, and it was a big issue prior to COVID, and then, you know, COVID changed so much. You know, it really kind of distorted everything. But climate change was a big issue prior to COVID. Then everything got put on the back burner, understandably so. But when we talk about, you know, this volume of data that's constantly growing, and having now to maintain it and wanting to keep it active and online, energy becomes a concern. And I think data centers are going to be under more pressure to not only control cost containment is going to be big, you know, in post-COVID economy, but I think climate change is going to be, you know, a big issue as well. So, you know, it's all about storage optimization, really, in the end. And, you know, all the formats are great. There's a need for flash, there's a need for disk, there's a need for tape, cloud, on-prem, off-prem, it all works for a specific purpose. But, in as much as we can, when data goes cold or it's infrequently accessed, let's move it to a lower energy consuming tier, like tape libraries, for example. And it's grooming the data, making sure it's in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and that's not a human job. That
No.
can't be left up to a human. It's too much.
It's massive. It's not manual anymore, but
Right.
there are so many intelligent data management tools, such as you guys provide, that really are key to making this work.
So, I mean, how would someone get started doing that? Let's say you have, petabytes of data, all on primary storage. I mean, it's some organizations do have that. Where would you all recommend they start? So where should they go first to educate themselves, or what applications should they look at first, or what processes should they really focus on internally to start solving these issues? So maybe we'll start with you, Nami, and then we'll go around, because I think each one of you is going to have a different perspective on this issue. Where does someone start?
Yeah, so not a lot of companies actually know how much data they have. So I think that's going to be the very first question, and and how the frequency of accessing the data would look like. These things would be really key. But I think it would be very difficult for customers to swap everything around and adding another layer, things like that. So I think it is very important to have a data management solution, a software that can kind of oversee what kind of data, what kind of storage silo they have, and also being able to look at how frequently each of these data that resides on each of the storage is accessed. And that way, the storage administrators would be able to get a sense of transparency, not just the storage administrators, but maybe also the end users as well. So, for example, like our solution, we just try to be on the back end so that there is no disturbance from the front end, the primary tier, so I think there is an issue with scalability, cost, and security. There are always like issues around those three components. So I think it is very important to assess your storage in the first place, and then according to that, protecting your data by security means, and ensure that it is scalable, and ensuring that you are not like asking for the same amount of budget every year is very important.
Yeah. How about you, Rich? Where do you recommend people get started?
Yeah, so I mean, I could put in a plug for Active Archive Alliance. Certainly has a lot of solutions there, activearchive.com. But really, practically, it's about data classification, understanding what's mission critical, what isn't mission critical, and then leveraging metadata and being able to manage the files automatically and move them by policy. So I think it's not really storage first; it's understanding the data first, and then providing the storage tiers that you need to, again, satisfy those service level agreements. But I think there are a lot of solutions out there today, not only on a hardware side, but in the software side, as you guys have many products to offer as well.
Yeah. How about you, Eric?
So I would start with what questions you probably don't think you can ask, or things that you don't maybe think you can change, and that would be, look at what applications you're using. Are those helping you in your storage problem? Or are those helping cause your storage problem? Or are they helping solve it? So if you have applications that can only write to file, and that's absolutely what they need, then maybe that's not the right, maybe those applications aren't helping you as much as you think they are. Applications, we've seen this evolution with backup products, where it used to just be that they supported tape, then they started bringing in disk arrays as a as a supported backend, and now it's object storage, S3 brought in as a backend that it can address. That would be an example of an application that has evolved over the years to support different types of storage backends. But it could be other applications as well. The other thing that you may not think you can change is your storage vendor. If your storage vendor only has, high performance, file-based storage, and that storage system itself is not providing you the intelligence to be able to make use of these different layers or different types of backend physical storage, then maybe it's not helping you. Maybe there's a better place to go for that, because a lot of people think about the problem. They think, well, I've got to figure out a solution. I've got to do it myself. I've got to figure out a way that I can, use my file that I have, on my high-speed file that I have now, and I've got to figure out some way to make that go to cloud seamlessly so that users don't notice it. And when you start thinking about those in those terms, you're kind of fighting against what you have deployed right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So applications and your actual storage infrastructure would be places that I would question of how does that help me?
Yep. So understand what you're doing, understand your data and where it's needed, and don't be afraid to question everything, right?
And don't delete anything.
And no, yeah, absolutely, don't delete anything. And I mean, as is always the case on Brews and Bites, we flew through our time, and we're coming to the end here. Well, again, I encourage you to download the assets and the attachments that are attached to the webinar. We have some great ones. As we do with the show, we like to close with words of wisdom. So let's start with Eric this time. What your words of wisdom for everyone out there? It could be about the topic. It could be about overall life in general. So what are your words of wisdom?
Well, I think I'll stick to the topic. I think I just had a bunch of it, which was question everything. But there's one thing about technology, and that is it always changes. And if you fight against the change, then you're going to get swallowed up in it. The trend that I was talking about earlier was one of more empowerment to the users of the data, more self-service, and that it's a constant battle to try to evolve your environment in a way that provides the structure and the management framework around it that you need as an IT organization, but yet then gives freedom to the end users to do their own, make their own decisions, and to cause data to move between tiers. And so that's the trend right now, is more towards self-service. It's users, they want all of their data. They want it now. They want it online, but they want new applications too that come along that could use that data. And so it's kind of the Wild West in a way, but you could rewind 10 years or 20 years from now, and the same description would be, it's all the Wild West. We just don't know what to do with all these desktop computers that are running around that are putting out, displacing the mainframe. So it's just it's the same story, but a different decade. And now we're just dealing with data.
Yep. Dealing with data. How about you, Nami? Words of wisdom.
Yeah, so I feel like, some people think that, we're competing with the cloud, but we're absolutely not. I just want to highlight that I'm really a true believer of everything in its right place, like in the Radiohead song. So, all storage has its own pros and cons, like I mentioned earlier, and we all have to understand, about that and smart about it. But of course, it really becomes complex with all these storage silos, and with what Eric mentioned a little bit earlier, the question before this, maybe you have to really look at your storage vendors, but at the same time, it's really going to be really complicated. And maybe a lot of companies have more than, like 3 vendors. And, that really becomes a nightmare sometimes. And if you think about, migrating your data, things like that, it'll be another nightmare. So yeah, I'll just say that, that's what we're here for, Fujifilm. And, you can also find information about us on FujifilmObjectArchive.com, or contact me, Rich. I'm sure Eric and Adrian can point to the right people here too. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Rich, how about you? Words of wisdom.
Well, I guess I'll stick to the subject matter too, since the other two did so as well. But I think of a former colleague of mine who said that the best way to solve an IT budget is to start an active archive. So that kind of sums it all up.
Yeah, I think we all like that. We all like that statement. And I mean, is there anything, we're coming up to time here, but is there anything we didn't cover that you want to communicate to the viewers out there? I mean, Nami, you already told them where they can get started going to Fujifilm Object Archive. Anything else anyone wants to share? Any last point you want to make before we close things down?
Well, just want to say thanks again very much for having us. And, I think there's lots of opportunity in the year ahead. Hopefully we get this COVID behind us, and we'll all get back to a little bit more normalcy. Let's hope for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Everything will definitely look better than this year. So, yeah, thank you from my end for having us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for coming. And I love Rich's background, sharing a little bit of the holiday spirit.
Happy holidays.
And peace in the back. So I think from all of us, we just want to say happy holidays. Hopefully everyone stays happy, stays healthy throughout the holidays. Everyone sees the light at the end of the tunnel, right? We're almost there. So next year will be a different year. We'll have the roaring 20s just like they did back in 1920s, right? So looking forward to that. And with that, just want to thank you so much, both Nami, both Rich. Thank you so much for your time today. Eric, as always, it's always a good time. Wow. And that's it. So just want to thank everyone, and that concludes our webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Be safe.
Bye.